Hey everyone, and welcome back for another edition of Cannabis Capitol's Pop Politics. I'm your host, Chris Egger, and I'm here today with Elliot Lewis, the founder and CEO of Catalyst, which is a dispensary and retail license holder throughout the state of California, right? And he's here to chop it up. And if anyone knows Elliot, he came in a much more reserved fashion today. He said he really wanted to dig into the issues and speak to some real priorities for the cannabis industry and culture here. So Elliot, as you know, this show is really focused on educating a cannabis consumer as well as the business and industry peers on kind of what the important issues politically are. And we've been talking about taxes, local control, and stuff like that. You've been making huge waves in the space, but you know, what should we chop it up about first? What's the first thing we should get into here?
I mean, it's your show. Anytime.
All right, well, let's talk about Long Beach last week, man. The fireworks in Long Beach were, it was explosive last week. We had a full protest led by you and Sean Kiernan from Weed for Warriors and some other members of the Long Beach cannabis community, alongside a statewide press conference that was held by the Long Beach Collective Association, really talking about the issue of taxation, right? And I mean, where are we at with the state of California on these issues right now?
Yeah, so there was like this statewide thing, and they were, you know, each region was going to do a thing, and then that kind of faded away. Mostly who was leading it was the guy from Flocana, Mike, I forget his last name. And then there was, you know, going to be these different regional protests. They kind of simmered down and decided to go online, and I was like, well, you know, try to represent LBC. We want them to know that LBC makes the most noise. So, you know, we called on some of our people as well as a lot of the people in the industry that are kind of following us. So we had a protest just to bring awareness to the issue. I do think there will be some incremental changes in Long Beach, which will be cool, that we're working on. I'm speaking to some of the city council people. I was already kind of talking to them. And then, you know, the turnout at City Hall always is a nice thing.
It was, and it was a great showing. There was at least 150 people there.
I'd say I'm not great at counting people, but I'd say something like that. And, you know, we had great speakers, because I do think the issue, and, you know, look, I just did a real quick thing at the end, but I do think getting away from business owners, and I don't think this is a fair critique, you know, crying about that they're not making enough profits or whatever, getting away from that perception, and really who's it affecting. So if you look at our speaker lineup, you know, it was Sean Kiernan, who's a veteran, you know, kicked it off. Great guy. We were talking about it.
He's
before.
an SB 34 donation advocate as well. He serves the veteran community throughout the state, right?
Right. So this is about affordable access to veterans, right? Then the next speaker was from a growing perspective, who's really suffering probably, you know, even more than the retailers. And Wonder Bread, who's a well-known big grower, is, you know, going through all the price compression. Then there's one successful social equity applicant out of 177. There is a new program that's going to be pushed forward that, you know, we're proud we had a large part in. But she spoke, super impressive. Like, when I heard her story, it gave me goosebumps. When I heard there was one person that made it through this original horrible process that Long Beach had, I was like, I got to meet her. And so we've got to know each other. Just really powerful story. There was another gentleman who was incarcerated he had a life sentence for cannabis that he spoke. And then one of our own, Sam, she told her story of like how she lost her job during the pandemic, started as a budtender, worked herself all the way up to HQ, really, you know, just gone from, you know, budtender to a, you know, a powerful young woman within the organization.
A career track.
Exactly. And that's, you know, kind of the point. And then, you know, I kind of finish it off. You guys have all heard, you know, me go on these rants, but I do think the important things to focus on as far as statewide policy, I say there's about 300,000 jobs on the table. The best possible industry right now since tech. Where else is there 300,000 jobs? You know, we're unionized. These are all unionized jobs. You could come in. You don't necessarily have to have a huge education, and you can move your way all the way up. Right. We have a third of our HQ that are, you know, started as budtenders. So this is the greatest career path that they're strangling out. And then you have the social equity issue. They pass laws, they walk away, and then they're like, good luck. California cannabis is the hardest fucking business on the planet. You throw in the social equity component, and it's really, really hard because they have different barriers of entry that maybe, you know, other industry people don't have. So just putting that out there so they could see who the bad policy is really affecting. And this is all true, authentic stuff, but, you know, trying to send that message. Look,
humanizing it.
Yeah, it's not just business owners crying, right?
And people in their communities, and a lot of them are small business. So there's a cost to compliance, right? For being a business owner of any type in a city and a community, right? You have to get your permits for occupancy, make sure your fire inspections go well. But cannabis has this additional, I keep bringing it up on the show here that there was this war on drugs mentality for a long time, and the mindset has changed. The medical advances, the idea of cannabis as a holistic wellness product, an alternative medicine product, and as an adult use choice, right? I mean, those are all what confuse the process. But you have these two, you have the normal business. Every business is struggling and suffering, right? And then you have this layer of highly complex anti-diversion, all these security protocols, various things that you have to do to be in compliance. Someone in the city of Huntington Beach the other day was asking, how do you in a cash transaction monitor the transfer of products? That's metric, that's a whole nother level of compliance. And then finally you have this onerous, just completely unfair tax, right? I mean, and I've heard some people say it's almost up to 50% of the price of a product in a retail storefront by the time it makes it through all the various levels, right? So that's what the protest was about, right? Not about local access, although that's something that we also should get into a little bit, right?
Well, we try to keep it simple. I think the local access issue is a little more nuanced. So our slogan was down with taxes, up with access. We would like to see the cities that haven't gone expand access. I think that one, there's maybe some small differing opinions on it. I'd be in favor of about 1 per 15,000 residents as far as ratios for cities that haven't gone yet. Then I think there's some political theory about could you beat down local control and how should you go about it. But I do think the lowering taxes is the easy industry-wide thing. And it looks like now, just recently, as of a day or two ago, it's going to be some incremental pat on the head. It's not going to be effective, and there's a long battle ahead of us.
That's right. I'm seeing that some legislation has been proposed, I think out of Humboldt County, right, to eliminate the cultivation tax and then shave a little bit off of the excise tax, right, in some capacity, right, to lower it or some sort of threshold.
To me, the argument is basic, and we were talking about this before the show. The consumer is paying it, right? And what we're trying to do as legal operators, and we don't hate on the BM, it is what it is. Those people are just, trying to make it. Most of us at some point we're dabbling at some level in it, so we don't want to be hypocritical. But all we want to do is play as a legal operator now, full legal, just fully compliant. So we want to play on an even playing field. So we're fighting over 20% of the market. We need policy that allows us to fight over is, probably the BM never goes away, but 70, 80% of the market, I think, would be on the legal table if they just got rid of all the taxes. So, where they get rid of it.
Fairly, number one, there's always going to be sales tax, right? So sales tax is when you have an auto dealership come into a community, when you have a 7-Eleven or a gas station, a new restaurant, or a cannabis business, right? You're going to see economic stimulus and tax revenue growth for a city, right? And I think we can both agree that there is, some legitimacy to the idea of an excise tax for certain products, right? And, but the fact that it's so egregious for cannabis, right? I mean, that's really where the change has got to start. Am I right?
Yeah, I agree. And to me, whether they took, they do it by the pound, but, if they take a couple percent here, but they leave the big tax there, in the end, it's all coming from the same place. So they're catering to the farmers, and they are the ones suffering. But at the end of the day, it's not going to have an impact.
They're suffering on the front end of it,
right?
But there's other people suffering along the way. And in terms of, I know the lab, the lab community and that particular license class, which is separate from all the others, and vertically integrated operators are barely hanging on to their margins, right? By doing that, and so my goodness, the idea right now in this show is to try to find common ground in the industry, right? So do you think taxation should be the number one priority? Because I want to dip into this whole idea of the local control and access, because
I think it's twofold. I do think there's a problem with access because it creates a bottleneck. Now,
and I think it also supports an illicit market that continues to thrive because there are these deserts, because there's lack of access, because people are going to be entrepreneurial, because they don't have access to the regulated shops that, like Maywood or Long Beach or Santa Ana or Costa Mesa will have, and all these various locations. over time, right, that would change the dynamic of the illicit culture, right? I think it would bring more people. I think the rising tide floating all boats. I think you open more local access, reduce the taxes. And that's one of the things you and I were talking about, is that in Long Beach, when they reduced the taxes outside of the retail environment,
Right.
so on the manufacturers, they saw a rise, an increase in overall taxes. Now, you mentioned, of course, there were some stores that opened during that period of time, right, to add to the contributive, tax collections. But at the same time, they more than doubled what their projection was, even after having reduced it, right? So they doubled it from their original projection, and they had actually thought they would lose money by reducing taxes. It was quite the opposite effect. And I think it's important that we talk about this, because I have a lot of respect for the UFCW and the SEIU and what they do to represent, the working class and people in these issues that are important. But, one of the things I think is unfair, and there's a couple articles that have come out recently about, depriving children of taxations. Now, I go, and I have said this time and time again about the Orange County grand jury report regarding adult use cannabis taxes in Santa Ana, going to create and help build youth-centric programs in the community. Are potheads the only people who are supporting children in their communities? And if so, what can we learn from that lesson? And what should other people in the community be doing for it, right? So more taxes could be collected, in theory, if you look at the model of Long Beach, right?
Cannabis was illegal for 100 years. They figured out how to make budgets. I'm a tiny bit more sympathetic to the cities who could, maybe make a little money off it. But look, if you do comparative analysis, and I've done a video once where I have 10 barrels of oil behind me and 1/8 of cannabis. So the oil has big lobbies though, right? And what's being taxed more? The 1/8 of cannabis. And then you have alcohol, which, creates a lot of deaths. Ask any first responder. It's $3.30 a gallon. So why are they putting the entire burden on us? And then if you really do the math, 300,000 jobs with the payroll tax, and then you take a state like Colorado, which per capita, which should ultimately be the judge, is getting like 65 cents per person, and California is 20% per person. There definitely is a lot of ability to get more taxes by lowering them. How it exactly shakes out, who knows? And look, there's no doubt that in Long Beach, when they lowered it, those businesses were saved. They were dead in the water, right? You cannot pay 6% gross tax as a manufacturer or a distributor.
And it compounds, right, throughout the supply chain up into the retailer and all that.
And at the end of the day, it all goes to the customer. And again, if it's 40, 50%, it all depends on the municipality and what their canopy was, and if it's high shelf or low shelf. By the way, you pay per pound tax, whether you're growing sun grown or whatever,
right.
Boof or bomb, right? So then you can never really figure out what the exact tax is. You don't even know where it came from, and you got to calculate the canopy. But just say 40, 50% by the time it gets to us. And that doesn't count, our additional costs of like OSHA, labor, having a real HR, having the compliance. So it's at least 50% pricing disadvantage. And again, where they take it doesn't matter. And just throwing a bone to the cultivators, which is the smaller amount of the tax, is not going to really help them in the long term, and is not going to help the industry at large. Look, I'll take every penny. I'm not going to say, no, but we're going to be having the same conversation 2 years from now, and why I'm a big believer in a 2024 ballot
I think it
initiative.
normalizes, though, some of the humanity of what the end to the war on drugs, a failed war on drugs, or including cannabis in that mindset, right? I mean, I'm not going to get into the fentanyl epidemic and the the crystal meth epidemic and how those are, very destructive, corrosive. But for a long time, right? I think that cannabis has proven itself now to be a valuable constituency in the community, whether it be in support of children through these tax dollars, man, potheads, taking care of kids and paying attention to school, but also by being good neighbors and by bringing the right vibes. I know that you've done a bunch of events right in your community on Pine Avenue, right? And
I mean, that's where I literally just came from. We're gonna do an event Saturday. My guys are out there doing another round of landscaping, and we're really trying to uplift the block. And it's we do it for its own good, but we also want to ingratiate ourselves with community, and nothing's done in a vacuum. We understand it's good to be out there, but I think cannabis businesses are generally super generous. My issue is I actually think some of them get the argument, sadly, right? I think some are still learning. I think some of them get the argument, but there's political forces in Sacramento, and the SEIU is a big one, and now they're playing the lowest card that they could possibly play about, children of color in South LA. They're going to lose these programs. And these are the same people that really don't give a shit, right? And it's super frustrating to watch them play this card when it actually is the opposite of what's happening. And if a state has a $31 billion surplus, and these programs within the cannabis tax, I think, are earmarked around $400 million, but they want to make sure that's in there. There's a way to figure it out, right? So,
no doubt.
And I'm not arguing whether the SEIU programs are good or bad, but the fact is the SEIU is a powerhouse. They run Sacramento. They run all these political people. And, there's so many things that we have to overcome besides, in quotes, winning the argument. There's a political landscape that's very, very hard to defeat.
Right. Now, I would say, to the point of what we were talking about with the city of Long Beach, demonstrating that with reduction in taxes, right, they actually increased revenues for whatever the various reasons were. I firmly believe that if a proper economic analysis was done on changing the taxation landscape, but expanding, bringing more of the illicit market into the regulated market by expanding local access in communities that don't have it, and by providing, the support services that banking and other things we can talk about, right? But, here we are. We have the opportunity to actually maybe support the vision that the SEIU is promoting and actually see revenues there and locked in and ready to be deployed because of that growing groundswell. I think in most cities, right, sales tax, they usually put additional points on top of what the state takes, to help with programs. It's beyond me that we're being targeted so viciously, so to speak, right, after the war on drugs ending and into this regulatory thing. And one of the reasons I've been trying to get you on here, and I know that you've been Long Beach is where you started, right? And you're
born and raised. That's what I'm repping.
And you are fast growing throughout the state. But everywhere that you're growing, that's because there's already some sort of regulatory place. But you've been at the forefront. You've been a clarion voice for trying to get new cities to open up, especially in coastal California. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on in the South Bay, if you wouldn't mind, because I know you got some initiatives that are circulating.
Yeah, so there's 4 initiatives. No secret. We funded half of them. We paid for the funding of half of it. They're expensive. I have shareholders too, so I'm hoping I get 1 or 2 of these. But at the end of the day, and look, I'll be real open on camera just so we can put this issue to bed. What's the advantage when we write an initiative? We make the map. So we go out, we lease real estate before everybody comes to the party. But look, we've been really good at winning when it's been a reactive process. Now we're just getting frustrated and we're pushing it forward. And we do put some policy in there, policy we believe in, whether it be points for having a collective bargaining agreement or whatever. Of course, we meet those criteria, but we think it's good policy. So, I've heard the conflict of interest thing. Of course, there's always a little hustle behind it. That said, now that I got that disclaimer out of the way, look, it's really important for us to open cities. South Bay's been a big flashpoint. You will hear of some other cities going. Some might actually look like the city passed it, right? But we're there with an initiative, pushing on their back. For whatever reason in Redondo Beach, they invited us in, which I don't understand, and we're calling it the Red Wedding. They like Damien, who's my right hand.
The attorney who's been working with you for.
That's my roll dog, right? Yeah, right. He's like the Kaiser Soze of cannabis.
He doesn't do much public speaking. No, maybe in front of the judge.
Well, it's funny. He's an intelligence analyst for the military. So I think his nature is to never give anything, right? And I'm a little more outspoken, but we're very like-minded on where we're going with it. So they invited him to the meeting. He did the presentation, and they were just super rude. Red Wedding, we called it. And look, we got thick skin, but people who were pro-cannabis were making up lies about the initiative. Nobody ever attacked the policy. They've attacked us personally. Yes, I know I'm outspoken. I said the F word a lot on camera. Whatever, but they had fun with it.
You can fucking say it here. This is a First Amendment platform. We are all about speaking your mind.
People have asked me, I'm like, that's how I grew up talking, right. And I'm CEO now, so I ain't changing it. But the Redondo Beach, one gentleman in particular, and by the way, we're in different forms of negotiating with the other 4 cities. You're allowed.
Those other 4 cities are Manhattan Beach,
Hermosa Beach, El Segundo.
Okay.
Right? And then there's some other ones that you will see pop out. One that has been filed, and I'm a little sworn to secrecy, but you'll see them, coming out. Some other ones we're kind of negotiating. And once you go out and get the signatures and pass them, then you get that table image respect, whatever you want to call it. We call it table image. Like, we dropped 6,600 signatures at City Hall at Redondo Beach, made a little show of it. So they're like, uh-oh, right? And they love local control. The thing that I've learned is just because there's enough majority cannabis votes on the city council doesn't necessarily mean they want to give up the control or they want your measure to be the measure.
I love the fact, though, that in the state of California, that the citizen initiative has led to some really profound and meaningful policy, right? AUMA being one of them, right? That's one, but also Prop 13 and the property tax issue at the time, right? So a plenary power is an all-encompassing power. So the people of California, you actually have the right, and to go and get it qualified does not guarantee that a city council can adopt it, recognizing that their voters have put some
well, between us, that's usually the objective. We were fortunate enough in El Monte to get a adoption. Nowhere in the South Bay are we going to get an adoption. Maybe we should have done a little better job on the outreach. We tried, but we are where we're at.
But they're aware now that their constituency is looking for this issue to be front and center in one form or another. So they're pushing you. All right. So the other three are still in a qualification mode. So you're still gathering signatures.
No, they're either submitted and they're like waiting to give them back. Okay. But they're all have signatures that have been turned in. Maybe Hermosa, we're just about to turn them in. But Manhattan's, I think Redondo Beach and Manhattan Beach, and I'm pretty sure El Segundo have been officially qualified. Like the Redondo Beach was like 540 out of the 6,600 were good. Like we check them, we have the PDI data, which is a program, and we make sure there's no duplicates. And then we only needed 4,700. We don't want to look like dipshits, so we get more than enough, right? So there we were getting a 70% success rate. They knew it was going to pass. So they're all running to do their own initiatives, which is kind of its own win, and it's cool. So whether we get licensed or not, all 4 South Bay cities are going to have cannabis.
But it's not just you. It's not like you're getting a monopoly in the cities that you're doing these initiatives. You may have said, like you brought up, that you were invested there and you've paid the dues to get to where you want to be in those communities, right?
Well,
you've done the footwork, you've done the legwork, you've done, you've funded, political activism and vogue. So, but there's other people who will still be able to accomplish.
Anybody could apply. To be honest, now in Redondo Beach, I'm like pretty much sure we're losing for sure. I let my property go, whatever. It is what it is, right? They can't all go well. And at some point, like if you run, 7 initiatives, I better bring back 3 winners or more, or, guys they're gonna stop investing, right? But in Redondo Beach, which has been interesting, they had an option to put it on the June ballot. And then they came up with this, it's gonna cost $244,000. So just as a fun, I knew they were going to say no. We offered to pay for it. Fuck you, we'll pay for it, right? And then all the people that got up and said, well, I don't know how they brought it on Prop 64. Doesn't it mean they will vote on it here? Then take it to the ballot. So now they're rushing to put together their own initiative. There is some news hot off the press today. It's insiders in there. I heard my photo was up on a wall with other people. Basically like, make sure this motherfucker doesn't get one. Make sure this motherfucker doesn't get one. Here's all the players, whatever. But, so we started off. The guy who was the biggest dick at the meeting was this guy Obagi, right? And so we have an Oppo guy, former FBI guy. I just looked this guy up, right? So, it turns out he likes to steal from cannabis clients, allegedly. But he's on his way to being disbarred, allegedly. He has a case going. And it looks like he dipped into the trust funds. And I'm like, no fucking way. This is like too ridiculous that the guy being the biggest dick on the cannabis item has all this baggage, right? So then we ended up, there's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but just... It's important to do this stuff so that other cities see, like, there's, again, the table image, like, oh, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So we did a mailer. It was on Christmas Eve. It landed. It was cool. It had his face superimposed on the Grinch, and it was the cannabis attorney who allegedly stole his client's money, right? So through that, I actually got quite a few friends in Redondo Beach, and I've learned a lot about Redondo Beach politics, housing, homelessness, and all the things that he's doing for basically the majority. So I've had all these people reach out to me, and he's actually not that popular of a guy. So now we're like, fuck it. So they ended up taking our ballot measure. They can do it technically. They pushed it to March 2023.
Because, by the way, this is something that's funny because Riverside, the city of Riverside, used to have an odd cycle election. So did the city of Los Angeles. And what they found is that voter turnout was heavily reduced on the odd-numbered election years. They used to say the reason for it was so you could focus on the local issues, right, in the community. And for Los Angeles, and different places, when you have the governor and you have the president,
Right.
those big ticket elections, you get more people who turn out. So they transition away from that. But this is they're using parliamentary tactics, right? Because they can.
I mean, we were going to pay for it. It seems like the Democratic thing. And without getting too deep into it, because of the range of the days, we couldn't be on November. But as somebody running a cannabis initiative, your best ballot is presidential because you get the youngest, most liberal voters. Really, is not a liberal conservative
And
issue.
the widest audience.
And the widest audience. The second best is midterm. And then so on and so forth from there. And young, we've pulled these, up and down. Young is our best demographic. Get out of the Republican Democratic paradigm. If you're young, this issue's, dominating. Like under 40, it's getting up to 80.
I think this is a common ground issue. I get used to make this is not an actual official organization, but I would say the Jack Herrera Taxpayers Association, like the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association.
Right.
If you own a house in California, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. As you get closer to retirement, if they could keep assessing new taxes on you, right, you would not be able to sustain ownership of the home that you had built your life into, right?
Well,
and that's what Prop 13 was about. Right?
There's not much. There's not much today in today's society that is polling at 70%, right? In almost every vicinity, even the little. And the South Bay is kind of fun because you get a little more like Karen Chadwick types up there. Not everywhere. There's good people. Whereas like some other cities maybe a little more low profile.
I always find it odd, Laguna Beach, right, which has a rich history of alternative, creative artist mentality. The use of cannabis is prevalent throughout the city. I know, the LGBTQ plus community, which is a strong roots in there, and the AIDS epidemic and the use of cannabis, which is really 1996 why we got the Compassionate Use Act on the ballot. The oncologists who were treating AIDS patients also saw anecdotally the help it was giving. So there's all this. So what I want to get back to then is these local initiatives, and we've talked about them on this program. Do you see that as the best way forward in a lot of these dialogues with cities? Because there's so many cities that have yet to make a move on these issues. Is it the only way to get it done at this point?
I mean, I do think there's the statewide makes it easier. Like, how long is it going to take, and how many groups are out there actively doing it? Like, I'd say we could do 10 to 12 over the next 12 months, counting the South Bay.
And you don't have unlimited resources and funds, right?
And time and bandwidth. There's like 3 guys in our licensing department. It's my brother getting the real estate, me kind of running a little bit of, a politics strategy, and then Damien, right? So we're small. Anyway, there's only so many we can do. But it is a good solution, and I've seen it now happen a bunch of times. As soon as you get it out there, and they know you're a legitimate group that can get signatures, now boom, they move on it. If not, they like the status quo. They think they don't want to take the risk. They don't realize how high it pulls. And then the other thing, don't underestimate, they don't necessarily care to represent the constituencies. These are people that are hanging out at fancy fundraisers and their little, a nice little wine parties. I'm stereotyping a little bit, but they're hanging out with the donor class.
But they've stereotyped you too, right?
But they're not hanging out with the people, right? And so, like, they don't want, Karen and Chad and Brad, who they hang out with, to be like, why the fuck did you let cannabis in our city? So there's a thing there. And then again, if they thought it was something that the voters couldn't have passed, why not put it on the June ballot and just let? My issue is real simple. Just let the voters decide if you don't think it's possible. So this is why this has been put into the democratic process.
And that's a plenary power that's been California Supreme Court has granted. Like the if you are a citizen in California, you have the right to go out and help form policy, and because of that, they cannot restrict. They can only grow its powers in the future, right? So AUMA was the big harmonization, but that's why SB 420 and all those various precursors. The only real functioning Prop 215 compliance era was an Attorney General guideline established by then Attorney General Brown before Governor, right? And he basically was saying you have to be able to demonstrate that you're trying to create some sort of vehicle, so the mutual benefit nonprofit corporate entity.
Right.
We were paying sales tax back then. I wonder why no one's gone back to see how much was actually being paid, because I knew during that era of time it was loose and fast in many people's business models. But anybody who wanted to be able to stand in a civil environment, right, and also deflect from criminality, right, prosecution, had to be paying sales tax, had to have that relationship with the franchise tax board. So this is all leading me to what I want to talk to you about too. So Sean Kiernan, he was the first guest on this program, right? And this has been about maybe 18, 20 episodes later, right? And I brought up the California Cannabis Reform Initiative on many occasions. And it's something that I truly believe is a solution, right? But it's a statewide solution. And I know that the FOCANA, and I've actually talked with some of their principals. Let's say Nigel, who was there, one of their early, financial leaders, and I had a discussion about these topics. Do you see the ability, with all of the fractured nature, like you talked about, personality-wise in the industry and the different people that all have their own business agendas, right? But then we have this collective agenda for the framework and the legislative environment, and then we have consumers who love dope weed. They want to know it's lab tested. They want to know that someone sat there with a beaker and made sure that it had no pesticides and it was clean. Like all these things that we want, but at what price do we sacrifice? Do you think that something like that? Because Sean, his open letter was a big part of that, and his comments there were his belief that you said 2024 we need a statewide.
Yeah, and it's funny, if we were texting today, having a little bromance. I hope he doesn't take that the wrong way. But I think he sees it similar to me, and that's that the legislation's not going to fix this. They don't care about us. They've abandoned us. There's too many special interests up there. We could win the argument till we're blue in the face. Unfortunately, there's just too much politics involved. So there has to be a statewide initiative, in my opinion. And
Sean's as well.
And I've always kind of thought that I was letting 2022 play out. I was hopeful, but as we're seeing the SEIU, and when you have like two press articles, I planted a story or two in my life. When you have two press articles, hit basically simultaneously at two different newspapers with the same messaging from the SEIU, this is political, theater at its best. And again, this is not getting into whether or not those are good politics. I just don't think they're a stakeholder. So go.
Well, I understand from their perspective, right? The UFCW, who's their partner, right, in labor, is really actually very comfortable with the cannabis industry and trying to help navigate some of what this crisis is about, recognizing that if you're going to be able to have these businesses stay open, stay afloat, right?
Well, so I think the UFCW is highly in favor of the lowering of the taxes, and they're trying to work with the SEIU,
especially with labor peace agreements in place, to where the working beneficiary of this industry, right?
They would have more members. They'd have more good jobs. And again, even state tax on activity that's illicit not being collected. So just because the SEIU and UFCW are both unions, they don't agree on a lot of stuff. And the Teamsters
and Service Employees International, right, is SEIU. And so let me get to that point, which is that I really think that educating them on the potential of growing tax base, bringing more resources to the table for the programs that they want to see funded, and using that demonstrated case study in Long Beach, I think that is something that I would like to see, or I would advocate for, that I'm expressing out there. Because if you are a cannabis consumer, I mean, let's be real honest, going to a regulated store, it's a point of pride. It's the ability to get the best products and know exactly what you're getting. You don't always have to get what the guy has, but you can get what you want. That you have access to that and dignity. That there's the professionalism. Agribusiness is a historical tradition in the state of California, right? Whether it be wine, almonds, citrus has been diminished in Southern California. This is a way for us to return to our roots, especially in the Emerald Triangle. So there's this fracture. We had a panel here at the end of last year where we brought the Origins Council, which represents kind of the legacy grower community from the Emerald Triangle down to the Central Coast, more like you said, the sun-grown mindset. And then we had Supernova Woman from out of Oakland, which is like this real progressive and forward-thinking social equity and gender equity mindset. But you have a strong understanding of that. I think your house team, if nothing else, you and your wife, it's a female plant, right? So women have really grown their voice in this industry. And we had Long Beach, and of course San Diego, and CV Can, which is out in the desert. I mean, unifying a statewide voice, and I think the concept being is fair taxation with representation, right? Don't tax us and take that money and you know, make a business. They used to say money grew on trees in the cannabis industry. It doesn't. It functions like any other business, right? And when you overtax this business, like triple, quintuple what you're taxing other egregious businesses, right? Like, you know, like whoever has been complaining about their taxes, and I understand where everyone says, oh, you're a business owner, well, your taxes are too high. In this particular instance, man, it's like 4 times any other industry in the state of California.
Right.
So do you think that that's something that you can start to work on with someone like Sean? Because Sean has that great connection to the Northern California community.
So we're kind of kicking it around, and then there's political.
This is expensive, by the way. You're talking to the expense to get 6,000 signatures.
No, it's 6 million.
You need millions.
It's $6 million to get the signatures. Then to run a campaign is a whole different thing. So I think to do it, lowering the taxes is easy. Guys have different opinions on how you would do that. I'd get rid of the cultivation tax, which I do think will be gone. I'd make the excise like 5 or 0, right? And then, you know, beyond that, I do think the municipalities need to be addressed, but it's a more complex issue. And I think there's a way to do it where they have a cap of what they can charge. And if there are cities that need money, you know, Long Beach's a rich-ass city. I don't even know if they need the money because of the port and everything, right? But, you know, some cities need money right now.
It's a big city. It's a large urban center, and there's all kinds of demographics throughout, right? So,
Well, I don't mean like the people.
No,
I just mean the
budget for the city.
And we have oil islands out there making a bunch of money for the city. So again, you know, you have these other things that are more harmful, in my opinion, whether it be environmentally or alcohol or whatever, right? And then cannabis is getting taxed a certain way. So lowering the tax is the easy part. Then you get into the retail access. My opinion is, you know, as an industry for the steward, these cities that haven't gone yet need to go, and they should be mandated to do so if they don't go yet. My personal opinion is, and you know, if we turn them into liquor stores, UFCW won't like that. Obviously, we don't like that. We got to make some money. And the objective is to get to a point where
it's a specialized product. And by the way, I think the medicinal dialogue is important for us to remember as well, because there's the consumer who can say, well, my adult, you know, choice and recreational use is my, you know, holistic wellness mindset, right? And I get that, and I truly believe it's true. But there are some people, I think if you go out and speak with a doctor and actually get a recommendation in today and go through the county Department of Health registration process, it's egregious to me that you're paying a excise tax in that situation.
I mean,
right?
you could even argue a sales tax, but how do you get there?
Well, they don't do the sales tax on the medical if you actually have the card, right?
But they're super hard to get. And
that's my point, right? If you go through all those hurdles and you're still being asked to pay an excise tax on top of that, right? Which there's no way to extract. How you as a retailer can extract that from what you're purchasing after 2 or 3 steps.
So I do think on the policies, after talking with a lot of farmers, because there is a consensus, I think, from the vendor side that retailers are jacking, and I'm not saying some aren't. We mark everything up about a third. With our deals, we're running about 30% off of goods. Like when you run up the whole margin, it's tiny. We just keep our corporate overhead.
How many people
really
do you
low.
employ though?
Total about 250 right now.
God bless, right? So you're providing 250 jobs. You're buying products and bringing them into your stores, but you have to create revenue to not only employ those people and pay all these other costs of compliance, right?
But I do think 1 per 15,000.
So don't be ashamed.
No, I'm not ashamed. I'm a fucking hustler at heart, right? You know, we try to be a good one that does good for the customers. But I do think ultimately, what's the objective? It's to get more market share. So, like, you know, you take a city
for the regulated cannabis market,
yes,
and for the best practice regulatory compliant operators within that
right.
market. Bring in the heat. What did you say?
Fire prices.
Right,
and I think you get there, like whether or not it's 1 per 15,000 or 1 per 12,500, you're not going to change the market share. So what I would personally do, I wouldn't go back to cities that have already passed something. Like we're in Bellflower, it's 1 per 20,000. I wouldn't mandate one
who's already had it done. Just like Palm Springs and Santa Ana already had their legislation in place, and when AUMA passed.
And even if they're a little cushy, there's some markets that are cushy, you know, and I won't call out any of the ones that aren't my own, but like in Pomona, we only have 2. It's our fastest growing store ever, right? And they want to roll them out slowly, but I think politically, grandfathering in all existing cities that have gone would be wise, because it wouldn't disrupt the apple cart of current retailers. The retailers, I think, could sign up for that, right? And if they're in a cushier market, lucky on them, maybe they roll out some more licenses later. But that gives the farmers the ability to mandate on the ones that haven't gone yet, which is the the huge problem, right? Where you have one city in Orange County, or nowhere to buy cannabis in the South Bay.
Yeah, even with Costa Mesa coming online, you're essentially, that's a huge desert in Orange County. It's a very populous county, right? Like I said, I'm just shocked. I got to tell you, Elliot. So these conversations happen with thought leaders in this space, and whether or not you have heard of Elliot before, I'm certain you must have, right? Because he has very much become a vocal, clarion voice for responsible legislative change, and his frustration does come out, and I feel you, and I want to say this is the most mellow conversation I think I've ever had with you, and I'm glad you came on to do it, because I'm a firm believer in the common ground, and I think our industry needs to unite more. And I was talking with Elliot, I've been talking with some other leaders about doing another panel discussion where we're going to bring in some key leadership from throughout the Southern California communities, the desert and Orange County and LA County and San Diego again. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. So Sean, you are not allowed to say "Weed for the Warriors," right? You're not allowed to say it, right?
But I will
Elliot,
say one.
If you want to say anything, I always say this to anybody who's on the program. I'm going to be quiet from this point forward. Is there anything that I didn't ask you to talk about that you wanted to share with the audience today?
Well, look, I do agree the 2024 measure is the way to get there. So you have to get to a ground where the cities are okay with it, even though we don't love local control. The retailers could live with it. The farmers could live with it. We got to throw the SEIU a bone whether we want to or not. UFCW, I think, would be happy with that compromise. I've talked to some different people. Then we have a big coalition. Nobody's pulling against the rope. Then ultimately, I think it's something that could be passed. I hope I'm proven wrong. I do not see a legislative solution to this, and it's tragic. And quite frankly, by the time 2024 comes around, there's going to be a bunch of farmers that are probably out of business, and retailers as well.
And the illicit market's going to still be there. I would say to that point that I could share this. Beacon Economics, right? They've done a lot of studies over the years about economic benefit and stimulus. If the SEIU could be given some assurance, right, from some perspective of some articulated economic, wherewithal, and I think
the other thing would be like,
I would think that that's something that I think, because I agree with you, man. I don't want to badmouth the SEIU. I don't want to badmouth the UFCW. They do great things for working class people. They're really trying their best to be part of this new industry. I know UFCW is doing training, mentoring,
SEIU is not in the cannabis space. The one thing I will say,
but they are in the labor space. Is what I mean. They have a common mentality.
Yeah, and I'm not. It's just not a personal attack on them. But
no, it's not. But the
fact is, they're probably the main thing holding it up. One of my suggestions would be, are we really taxing offshore oil drilling enough here in California, right? So, and a couple $100 million tax on those guys is nothing, and that would backfill it. So I think there's other discussions behind, nobody ever likes.
That's what made cannabis a target. It was new. It was an Uber disrupted taxi cabs the way regulation disrupted cannabis, right? And it was a target, and they've maximized it. But I think it's been proven now it's unsustainable. I'm just offering up the idea of Beacon Economics to someone like that doing a real thorough study of what the potential for tax growth could be with expanded retail access, along with reduced excise taxes, but a growing market in the illicit side of things, not the illicit side of things. Hey everyone, I want to thank Elliot Lewis from Catalyst for being here today. This was a great conversation. If you know Elliot, he was mellow today, right? But meaningfully. This is the strategist, the thought behind what he's about. He is somebody who's making huge strides and progress on behalf of you, the cannabis consumer, as well as the cannabis culture. It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Thanks
and
for
I want to
having me.
say I'll look forward to doing it again down the road.
Of course.
All right.
Really appreciate it.
On that note, we'll see you next week, and we'll have a new episode and a new guest, but the topic's probably going to be taxes.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.